What if I told you that Napoleon Bonaparte's most humiliating defeat wasn't at Waterloo or during the retreat from Moscow, but against an army of fluffy bunnies in 1807? The man who conquered half of Europe got absolutely wrecked by a bunch of rabbits in what might be the most ridiculous battle in military history. Picture this: the Emperor of France, fresh off signing a major peace treaty, decides to celebrate with a relaxing rabbit hunt. Instead of a chill afternoon shooting practice, he ends up getting chased to his carriage by hundreds of hungry bunnies who apparently didn't get the memo that they were supposed to run away from humans. Today, we're diving into the Great Rabbit Incident, proof that even the most legendary conquerors can be defeated by the most unexpected enemies. This is Wacky History, July 1807. Napoleon just signed the Treaty of Tilsit with Russian Tsar Alexander, basically making him the unofficial CEO of continental Europe. Dude was feeling himself hard. Imagine the energy of someone who just pulled off the ultimate hostile takeover and is ready to pop champagne and celebrate. To mark this historic W, Napoleon decided to throw an epic hunting party. Back then, hunting was like the golf of aristocrats, a way to flex your status while pretending to relax. Napoleon wanted something fun and easy for him and his generals to blow off some steam after all that world conquering. He handed this task to his chief of staff, Marshal Louis-Alexandre Berthier. Now, Berthier was basically Napoleon's right-hand man, a logistics genius who could coordinate armies of hundreds of thousands. But now this military mastermind had to organize a bunny hunt. It is like asking a SpaceX engineer to plan a company picnic. Slight overkill. Napoleon's request was simple. He wanted lots of rabbits for him and his boys to hunt. In his mind, this should be easy mode. The guy had just defeated the most powerful armies in Europe. How hard could it be to handle some fluffy little creatures? Berthier, being the perfectionist he was, started planning this hunt with the same military precision he used for actual wars. He was determined to make this flawless. No way he was going to disappoint the emperor. But this obsession with perfection was about to create the most epic fail in military history. Here is where everything went sideways. Berthier faced his first challenge. Where do you get hundreds of rabbits for a royal hunt? Traditional hunting used wild rabbits because they'd actually run away, which is kind of the whole point of hunting. But Berthier made a catastrophic error. He chose domestic rabbits instead. His logic seems solid. Wild rabbits are hard to catch and expensive, while domestic rabbits are cheap, available, and you can get tons of them. Berthier's thinking was basically a rabbit is a rabbit. Right? This is like assuming a house cat and a tiger are basically the same thing because they're both felines. So Berthier's team started buying up domestic rabbits from farmers around Paris. They purchased hundreds of these fluffy prisoners of war, thinking they'd just pulled off the procurement win of the century. These guys probably patted themselves on the back for their efficiency. But here is the problem. Domestic and wild rabbits have completely different behavioral programming. Wild rabbits see humans and think, predator run. Domestic rabbits see humans and think, food dispenser, come to mama. These bunnies had been domesticated for thousands of years. They weren't afraid of humans. They were excited to see them. Even worse, these rabbits had been stuck in cages during transport and were absolutely starving. When they saw humans approaching, their first thought wasn't time to flee from my life, but finally, the servants are here with dinner. This mindset was about to create absolute chaos. Berthier had zero clue about this behavioral difference. In his military mind, enemies were enemies and should act predictably. He never considered that rabbits might defect and join the other side. July 1807, beautiful sunny afternoon. The hunt was officially started. Napoleon and his generals showed up in their fancy hunting outfits, rifles ready, expecting a chill afternoon of target practice. The vibe was pure corporate retreat energy, everyone relaxed and ready to have some fun. According to the plan, hundreds of rabbits were loaded into cages and strategically positioned around the hunting grounds. These cages were placed in open fields to give Napoleon and his crew perfect shooting angles. Everything looked flawless, like a perfectly choreographed military exercise. Napoleon took his position, raised his rifle, ready to start the show. His generals spread out to their assigned spots, each one expecting some easy shooting practice. In their minds, This was going to be like a relaxing afternoon at the gun range. Berthier gave the signal to release the rabbits. The cage doors swung open and hundreds of bunnies poured out. According to the script, these rabbits should scatter in all directions, providing moving targets for the imperial hunting party. But what happened next was completely off script. These domestic rabbits didn't run away. Instead, when they spotted the humans, they immediately charged straight toward Napoleon and his generals. These hungry bunnies saw these fancy-dressed aristocrats as their personal food delivery service and rushed over expecting their dinner. The atmosphere instantly shifted from relaxed corporate outing to complete pandemonium. Napoleon and his generals realized they weren't hunting rabbits, they were being hunted by rabbits. What happened next can only be described as an epic military disaster. Hundreds of starving domestic rabbits swarmed toward Napoleon and his generals like a fluffy tsunami. These bunnies didn't just refuse to run, they showed shocking combat determination. Napoleon, the guy who crushed the combined Austrian and Russian armies at Austerlitz, found himself surrounded by rabbits. These furry little creatures were jumping on his legs, crawling into his jacket, and trying to climb onto his hat. Picture this. Europe's conqueror being treated like a walking vending machine by an army of bunnies. The funniest part, Napoleon tried using his rifle to fend off the rabbit assault, but it was completely useless. First, rifles back then took forever to reload, way too slow for rapid-fire bunny defense. Second, these rabbits were too small and fast to aim it properly. Most importantly, Napoleon discovered he couldn't bring himself to actually shoot these adorable enemies. Napoleon's generals were facing the same crisis. These military geniuses who dominated European battlefields were now getting overwhelmed by fluffy creatures. Some tried using their swords to shoo away rabbits, others attempted to kick them off, but these bunnies deployed advanced swarm tactics, like a trained special forces unit. The most ridiculous part, these rabbits seemed to have a special obsession with Napoleon himself. Maybe it was his fancy outfit. Maybe he smelled like food. Whatever the reason, Napoleon became their primary target. The man who once made all of Europe tremble was now being chased around by a bunch of bunnies. The soldiers watching this scene didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Their emperor, this invincible military genius, was getting defeated by rabbits. The absurdity level was off the charts, more ridiculous than any comedy movie ever made. Faced with the relentless bunny offensive, Napoleon made a decision extremely rare in his military career: retreat. This man who never knew the meaning of backing down was being forced into strategic withdrawal by a bunch of rabbits. Napoleon started retreating toward his carriage, but the rabbits pursued relentlessly. These little creatures showed pursuit skills that would make elite cavalry jealous. Napoleon was running while trying to shake off rabbits clinging to his clothes. If any artist had painted this scene, it would have been the most hilarious war painting in history. Even worse, some rabbits actually jumped into Napoleon's carriage. When the emperor finally reached his ride, he discovered the enemy had already occupied his vehicle. These hostile forces were bouncing around on his seats, showing zero respect for imperial authority. Napoleon's attendants started helping him clear the rabbits out of his carriage. The scene was like playing whack-a-mole. They'd chase one rabbit out and another would hop right in. This battle for carriage control lasted several minutes, during which Napoleon's dignity was completely destroyed. Finally, with his staff's help, Napoleon successfully recaptured his own carriage. But even as the carriage started moving, some determined rabbits kept trying to chase it down. These little animals showed more fighting spirit than most of Napoleon's actual enemies. When the carriage finally escaped the bunny army's pursuit, Napoleon sat inside with his clothes disheveled, hair messed up, looking nothing like his usual imperial self. The man who conquered half of Europe had just been defeated by a bunch of rabbits. Back at the palace, Napoleon faced a serious problem. How do you explain getting owned by bunnies? This man who never admitted defeat now had to confront the embarrassing reality of losing to rabbits. First, Napoleon called Berthier for a post-battle debrief. The content of this conversation wasn't recorded, but you can imagine Napoleon's mood. He probably said something like, "Berthier, can you explain why I just got defeated by a bunch of rabbits?" Only then did Berthier realize what a massive screw-up he'd made. This military genius who could coordinate hundreds of thousands of troops had performed like a complete amateur on the rabbit question. He probably never imagined that the difference between domestic and wild rabbits could be so crucial, even more embarrassing. News of this incident quickly spread through the court. Napoleon's generals started privately discussing the Battle of the Bunnies with some barely containing their laughter. Imagine these conversations. Did you hear? The emperor got defeated by rabbits. What? You mean those little fluff balls? Yep, those exact fluff balls. Napoleon tried to downplay the incident's impact, but with limited success. In a society where military honor was everything, getting defeated by rabbits was definitely not a good look. It is like a modern CEO getting knocked over by the company mascot at the annual meeting. However, Napoleon did learn something from this experience. He realized that even the smallest details could lead to major failures. This lesson probably helped him in later military campaigns, though he'd never publicly admit it. Although Napoleon tried to cover up this embarrassing incident, history has its own way of keeping records. The Battle of the Bunnies was documented by several witnesses and became one of the most hilarious chapters in Napoleon's biography. Some nobles and officers present at the scene later mentioned this incident in their memoirs. While they were careful not to directly mock the emperor, the humor between the lines was obvious. These records were like modern social media posts, seemingly serious on the surface, but full of subtle shade and trolling. More interestingly, this story started spreading among common people and got more exaggerated with each telling. Some versions claimed Napoleon was chased for miles by rabbits, others said he got bitten, and some even claimed he developed a lifelong phobia of bunnies. While these were obviously exaggerated, they showed how fascinated people were with this incident. Some historians tried to defend Napoleon, claiming the story was made up or greatly exaggerated, but most evidence suggests this event really happened, though specific details might vary. After all, there were too many witnesses and records to completely deny it. This story also became propaganda material for Napoleon's enemies. British newspapers especially loved this story, using it to mock the invincible French emperor. Their headlines were probably like, "French tyrant defeated by rabbits," or "Bonaparte's new enemy, the Fluffy Legion." Modern perspective when history becomes a meme in modern times. Napoleon's rabbit incident has become a classic internet meme. This story perfectly embodies the concept of Gapmo. A conqueror of Europe getting defeated by cute little bunnies is just too hilarious for words. Social media is full of content trolling this incident. People have made Napoleon versus rabbits battle games, drawn funny comics, and written various fanfiction versions. All these creations capture the story's core. Even the most powerful people can be defeated by the most unexpected things. This story is also used to explain various modern phenomena. When a big company gets beaten by small competitors, people call it a modern Napoleon versus rabbits situation. When a political strongman gets overwhelmed by minor incidents, someone will reference this classic example. On a deeper level, this story reflects humanity's complex attitude toward power and authority. We both respect the powerful and enjoy seeing them embarrassed. Napoleon's defeat by rabbits satisfies some inner need to see invincible figures show vulnerability and absurdity. From a psychological perspective, this story is fascinating. It shows that even the most confident people encounter situations completely beyond their expectations. Napoleon was unstoppable on battlefields, but helpless against hungry domestic rabbits. This reminds us that life is always full of unexpected challenges. There you have it, folks. The complete story of how Napoleon Bonaparte got absolutely destroyed by a bunch of bunnies, from conquering Europe to getting chased around by fluffy creatures. This has to be one of history's most epic plot twists. This story proves that no matter how powerful or successful you are, life will always throw you some unexpected curveballs. Sometimes your biggest enemy isn't the most obvious threat, but something you never saw coming, like a bunch of hungry domestic rabbits who think you are their personal food delivery service. Next time you are feeling invincible, remember Napoleon and his bunny army. Stay humble, be ready for any absurd challenge, and most importantly, learn to laugh at life's embarrassing moments. After all, if the conqueror of Europe can get defeated by rabbits, what can't we handle? If you enjoyed this reality check historical story, smash that subscribe button, because next week we're exploring another mind-bending historical incident: why Roman Emperor Caligula tried to make his horse a consul. Trust me, history is way more entertaining than any comedy show. Until then, keep questioning everything, because in this world, the truth is always weirder than whatever you can imagine. And remember, sometimes the mightiest emperors fall to the fluffiest enemies.